of life. And how would we be different if we rested in the sovereignty of a God who is with us each step of the way? God is with me. And if God puts me in prison, I'll just rest confidently that God is with me. And if I get falsely accused in the marketplace, I'll know God is with me. And if I get turned upside down financially and it isn't my choices, it's just I was doing the best that I can, I was giving, I was saving, I was living on the rest, and then boom, my world fell apart. I will live each day in each circumstance as if God is with me. You see, the proper response to the transition of life is to act confidently as if God is with me. And you don't gripe about it, and you don't complain about it, and you don't blame, and you don't dishonor people that God has used in your life. I'm just saying, you stay humble before a God. You stay open to what He's doing, because you cannot judge what God is doing based on the circumstance. You live confidently, just like Joseph, that in prison, in struggle, in false accusation, through the most difficult of circumstance, you live confidently each day. God is with me. The story goes on, and he gets out of prison. He becomes Pharaoh's best man, the number 2 guy in the kingdom. He saves Egypt. He's in the process of saving Egypt from famine. One day he shows up at his job, he sits on the throne, and he looks out into the crowd of people who are gathered for their distribution of the goods, which he's responsible to distribute throughout the kingdom. And lo and behold, sitting in front of him, bowed before him, are his brothers. And I go, oh, God is with him now. This is going to be good. If you read the story, you can read it for yourself. Joseph plays some games with them. That must have been fun. Plays with them, falsely accuses them of stealing. But his whole goal is to get his father back to Egypt. He gets his father back to Egypt, and he brings them all back. And I know what his brothers are thinking. Dad, you better live long. Because when you're gone, there is no chance that we're still alive. He's going to keep us around, but when you die, it is over for us. How would Joseph respond when he has the upper hand and has the possibility for revenge? Look at how he responds, because how he responds helps us to understand how to respond to the difficult transitions of life. This is incredible. Verse 15. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him?" So they sent word to Joseph saying, "Your father left these instructions before he died." Father had died. "This is what you're to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins, the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father." When their message came to him, Joseph wept. His brothers then came, threw themselves before him. "We are your slaves," they said. But Joseph said, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God?" And then here's one of the great nuggets of all the Bible. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. You meant it for evil. God meant it for good. You know how Joseph acted in this scenario? He acted as a man who was second in command to Pharaoh, who believed 100% that God was always with him. And in a 13-year ordeal, what he realized was nothing touches him that God does not ordain to touch him. Not the bad things, not the good things. All things pass through the gracious hand of his faithful Father. And while other people mean things for evil, God is in control, and he always turns them into good. And when you look at the junk and the crud and the injustice and the wrongs that so many of us face, I know your stories. I know my story. You simply come to the conclusion they meant it for evil, but somehow God is at work and working for my good. You see, Joseph understood the sovereignty of God. He understood that their evil deeds and intentions had no effect ultimately at what God was doing. You say to yourself, well, does God cause it or does God allow it? It doesn't really matter, because if God allows it, he sort of causes it. And if he causes it, he sort of allows it. So I don't get caught up on that. What I know is God is in it. And God is with me in every circumstance. And he's always at work in all of our lives. You meant it for evil. God meant it for good. And God twists things. So the message to you today is simply this. As you deal with all of the things of your life, as you deal with this, just one more thing for many of you. Just say this. God, I believe you're with me. And I am going to act as a man who believes you're with me. God, I believe you're with me, and I'm going to act as a woman, a teenager, a young person, a single person, a married person. I'm going to act as someone who believes you are with me, and I don't know if you caused it or allowed it. What I know is this: if I fight it, I'll be bitter, and it will ruin me. If I accept it by your grace and mercy, it will allow you to work and do more in my life than I ever thought imaginable. You say, what does it mean, God is with me? I'll tell you what it means. If you look in the Gospels, the book of Matthew, God came to Mary and said, you're going to have a baby. The baby's name was and will be Emmanuel, which means God with us. Jesus. Jesus with us. If you go to the end of the Gospel of the book of Matthew, the final scene is Jesus standing on a hillside. And Jesus says to all of us, I will be with you always, even until the end of the age. I am with you. And I will always be with you. So the good news today is, in the middle of your junk, God is with you. Well, if God was with me, my circumstances would be different. No, no, no. You don't have a good understanding of God, and you're using the wrong gauge. Your circumstances aren't a good gauge of God's activity or God's love or God's faithfulness in your life. God is at work in you, working through you, and walking with you to do more in your life than you thought possible. Will you act like God is with you? Will you face each circumstance as if God is with you? How does a man act when his wife walks in and says, I'm leaving, if he truly believes that God is with him? How does a teenager handle the difficulties of high school and going back to school and the pressures if they really believe that God is with them? How is a single adult supposed to be a Christian single adult in a difficult world if they truly act like God is with them? How does it work? That is a critical question. I'll answer what you don't do first. You do not blame. Blame will always lead you to pointing back at God, and God is not offended when you're angry at Him. It doesn't move Him. He made you. He knows the real source of your anger, and it's not Him. You don't complain. When you complain, you demonstrate an incredible amount of ingratitude for what God has done in your past. Let's just make it practical. And this isn't meant me. I want to help you. If you complain in the future about Quest Church, you're really expressing ingratitude for what God has done in your life through this place. You don't run. When you run, God always brings you back to the same place where you ran from. It's a useless endeavor. You say, well, won't God let me skip that little part? He never does. He's like, oh, where was the issue we were dealing with when you ran? Oh, yeah, that one. Let's go right back there. And you're like, God, I've been gone for 20 years and you still want to talk about that? You don't ditch your character, that will just complicate your problems. Did you hear what I said? You don't ditch your character, that will just complicate your problem. What do you do in the midst of difficult circumstances? You live as if you're a person who believes that God is with me. And not only do you believe that God is with you, but you believe that everything comes from the hand of God. God is a sovereign God and knows and allows everything